Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for coming to the Community Development Committee meeting for October. We'll start with taking roll.
Dan Hansen.
Here.
Scott Counter. Sean Anderson. Sorry, Scott. All right. Ed Schochner.
Present.
Judy Achterhoff.
In attendance.
Okay. We'll take a look at the minutes from September 16th. Does anybody have any additions, corrections? No? I think we'll just call those good and approved, unless anybody objects. Public comment. Mr. Butler? Sir, you're up.
I'm here on behalf
If you go up to the podium, sir.
I'm here on behalf of the River Heights Trail residential owners, and I've dealt with this before. I sent an email that was transferred to Mr. Cox, who responded to me by sending me back a snotty letter that basically said, get lost. We bought the land underneath River Heights Trail, and we can do whatever we please. Well, that's not right. That's the general rule. I'm an attorney myself. He quoted me the general rule. We have an exception to the general rule, and I've got it right here. This is an excerpt of part of my abstract, and it says specifically, a parcel of land for private roadway easement. And since Mr. Cox and I dealt with this, the U.S. Supreme Court has decided another case that substantially expanded the rights of private property owners. You're not going to close River Heights Trail. And even with eminent domain, in order to have eminent domain, the need of the governmental organization must be reasonable and necessary. I'm sorry, but a sledding hill is not necessary. And that hill going up River Heights Trail, I used to sled when I was a kid. It's not steep enough for a sledding hill. You can all drive out there and look at it. It's not steep enough for a sledding hill, unless you're gonna haul in many truckloads and raise it up, you know, so it's about a 45-degree angle. Right now, it's about like that. You can try eminent domain, but there's enough money back there so we can tie this project up for years. We're not giving up our right to private. And look, we paid for that road. We paid to tar it. We paid to crack seal it and seal coat it. We paid for all of our own snow plowing. It's our road. It's not the county's road, and the county can't take it from us, not without a court order. And I don't think you can get a court order because it's not a reasonable need. It's not a necessary need. And then you want us to go in through a gate up on the far north end of the property? What's FedEx going to say about that? What's UPS going to say about that? What are all our guests going to say about that? These people don't want to check in through some gate. Mr. Cox needs to go back and do a little legal research on Westlaw and find that case. You'll find that what I'm saying about the rights of private property owners versus the government was substantially enhanced by that case. And I stand on that case. I'm sorry I don't have the citation for it, but you can quickly find it on Westlaw. Have your clerk do it. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
So I just didn't want you mad at the wrong guy. I know, I figured that. I just didn't want you mad at the wrong guy.
Thanks for coming, Mr. Butler. Thank you for coming. All right, Susie Gilbert.
Good evening, I'm Susie Gilbert. I live on Riverside Drive in North Hudson. I am a current board member from the Lake Association, Lake Malibu Association, and I also represent the Lake Association as a stakeholder member of the St. Croix County Water Network. And so I'm glad to be here tonight to give you an update on that as well. So being a member of the St. Croix County Water Network has provided the opportunity to be part of a collaborative effort in developing partnerships heading to the same goal of improving water quality in Lake St. Croix. I want to thank you for supporting and recommending that this program continue to be funded. It's been very helpful to us. This has also prompted me to become more familiar with the 2018 Land and Water Resource Management Plan, particularly as it relates to the watershed, water quality conditions, and impaired waters, of which Lake Malibu is included. This plan also recognizes the agricultural and rural community as an integral part of the plan of improving water quality. The goals listed in the 2018 Land and Water Resource Management Plan, I believe, play well into the St. Croix County's recent strategic plan. Under Natural Resources, Goal 1, which is to improve and protect the water quality throughout St. Croix County. Keeping in mind that supporting our conservation, agriculture, and rural communities to be part of that goal. I was part of the advisory group for strategic planning in the community, so I would like to recommend that a monthly report from the Resource Management Administrator be given to the Community Development Committee. I believe this would develop transparency and would help to achieve another strategic goal under service delivery, goal number 2, which is to increase awareness and inform members of our community of the services that are being provided and would help to communicate the great work that is being done to conserve our natural resources. The team in the Baldwin office is great, and they do a lot of work, and we appreciate what they've done for the Lake Association and for the St. Croix County Water Network. Should there be an opportunity for the Lake Association to be included in an advisory committee going forward, it would be greatly appreciated. I brought with me copies for you if you haven't read this article in the Baldwin newspaper. It's Farmer Lake Council, Lake Association Share Perspectives. This would not have happened if St. Croix County Network had not been formed and us being involved. So I think you'll find it interesting, and I'd like to share that with you. So I'll leave copies for you. And I want to thank you for your time this evening. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Julie. Or Susie. Susie, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Susie. Thanks for coming. All right. Moving on to the business items, we have the financial report for September.
I'm going to jump down to page 10 in the packet and apologize to Ellen. I had said, last year was an anomaly year, and we ended up with $415,000 in parks and fees rents. You can see, I think, the third line down. Where we were last year at this time was $398,000, and where we're at this year at the same point in time is $378,000. So, yeah, maybe we won't hit the same amount, but it's getting a lot closer than I ever thought it would. Park fees and revenues are continuing to be higher, and yeah, maybe we didn't budget high enough for next year. Other than that, that's the only line item in particular that I wanted to point out, but I'd be happy to answer any questions that any of the members have.
I just would like you to picture how much higher that would be if we had camper cabins. Just imagine the revenue stream if you had a yurt out there. By God, that would be something. Just think about it.
Spectacular, yes.
Okay, here ends the financial report. I've got nothing. Anybody else? All right, moving on. I'm afraid I just lost my agenda. Here we go. Next business item is a review of the draft Eckert Blufflands master plan. It looks like we're going to be listening to John. Wonderful.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair and committee members. To kick off this discussion, which is the Eckert Blufflands Master Park Plan, I just want to have you pay attention to your background information memo that you received in your packet. We'll be using that as a guide tonight. We basically talk about just giving you a brief rundown of some of the highlights of the park. Then after that, we like to have some discussion with the committee members about your reactions to the plan document, which you received about a week ago. We really need to know at this point in time whether or not if you have any questions, concerns, tweaks, revisions that need to be made to this document. And then depending on that discussion, we need to talk about timing going forward in terms of public hearing dates. And then some of the ideas we've used in the past about public outreach, whether or not we need to do any additional public outreach before the formal public hearing. So with that, I'll get started. The Eckert Blufflands Master Park property is 170 acres of land located adjacent to the St. Croix River. The southern third is located within the town of Hudson, the northern 2/3 within the town of St. Joseph's. Using my cursor arrow, you see Highway 35 just to the east of the property, Village of North Hudson, City of Hudson to the south, and then the loop trail facilities, the lift bridge renovation into Stillwater in this location on the upper left corner of your screen. Some of the impetus and support as to why we're doing a master park plan at this point in time. As some of the committee members may recall, in 2019 we updated our outdoor recreation plan, which accounted for the recent purchases of the Eckert and Richards property. And as part of that plan document, it was very clear that the next step in the process would be the master planning for this facility. The money that was used to conduct the plan was still some of the money we had from the mitigation funding, and that's kind of how things were started. And then some of the recent discussion regarding the St. Croix County Strategic Plan also supports some of the efforts going into this document. Under Natural Resource Goals number 3, the strategic plan identifies improve and develop county park trails. And then you see some of the supplemental objectives below. Exploring opportunities for camper cabins, accommodations, opportunities for new park properties, and improving the accessibility of county natural resources and recreation to the population, and exploring new activities for people using the parks and trails. So as part of this process, we asked our GIS department to do some analysis of some of the recent census data that was completed for 2020. We wanted to get an idea of how many residents would be living within so much of a distance from the park facility. And on the map above and in your packet, we just identified a 2-mile radius, 5, 10, and 15-mile radius. And this kind of lends into some of the conclusions we had during our comprehensive zoning update a couple years ago, that if you take the outside ring within the 15-mile radius of the park, we have about 80% of our population living within 15 miles of the park proposal. And so the eastern 2/3 to 1/2 of the county makes up the rest of the 20%. But again, you see the population rings going out by distance. I'd be remiss if I did not talk about a little bit about our recent trail construction efforts. This map just shows the location of Eckert Bluffland Park into some of the anticipated trail improvements we have planned. On phase 1 of your map is the 1.1 mile section of trail that will run from the Village of North Hudson from Summer Street North to the front door of Eckert Bluffland Park, the south access of Old Highway 35. That project is in the process of being designed right now with SEH Consulting Group. The phase 2 application would be a 1.2 mile trail picking up where phase 1 leaves off to County V. And then we have been working with the town of St. Joseph and Willow River State Park as part of the phase 2 application, which we are going to submit in January. It would include some on-road striping to get people to Willow River State Park. We met with Aaron Mason, the superintendent, and they do have plans on doing some mountain bike trails and bicycle trails that would pick up from the end of phase 2 into the remainder of Willow River State Park. And then, of course, phase 3 would be a future application that would finish our connection up to the Loop Trail, the historic lift bridge, and then on to the Browns Creek State Trail, and basically the rest of the metropolitan regional trail system in Minneapolis-St. Paul. Just to show you how the Eckert Blufflands Park relates to all that. In a little bit, I'll show you the connections we have anticipated into the park for bicycle and pedestrians. A little bit of details on the 170-acre park property. The 3 properties have been acquired since 2015. With the Richards, 2018 was the Eckert, and 2020 was the Zappa property. Of the 170 acres, we have about 2,800 feet of shoreline along the scenic St. Croix River. Very distinct features within the park, very diverse, unique amenities. We have steep ravine systems that go into the river. We have flat grasslands that we intend on restoring to native prairie grasslands. And then, of course, the river flats itself. So beginning in 2020, we contracted with Hoyzington Kogler Group Incorporated, a park planning firm out of the Twin Cities, to help us in the master plan document. The plan was to begin our efforts in early 2020. Unfortunately, we were all sent home on March 19th, 2020 because of the pandemic. So we really needed to rethink our outreach strategy with our consultants. So we did that, I believe, very successfully. So what we did is we did a significant amount of outreach with our Facebook page, county newspaper. We had a St. Croix County website. We have a project webpage. The unique thing we did is we got the addresses of everybody within a 3/4 mile radius of the park, which was about 600 addresses, and we sent a direct information flyer to all those residents. Also to the county board, every governmental jurisdiction within the county, every village, town, city, our colleagues at DOT, DNR, River Association. We have a number of bicycle and birding clubs within the county, as well as the Sportsman's Alliance. So we really had significant outreach that we weren't able to do in person, but we started to do by virtue of these efforts here. So I just covered the left-hand column, but on the right-hand column, we also had some additional engagement methods. We did meet with abutting property owners and in-holding property owners with Mr. Butler, who was just here earlier, attending one of those meetings. We also met with our government stakeholders, the town of St. Joseph, the town of Hudson, again, our DOT and DNR representatives. And then we also had an online survey that we had for all the people that we sent information flyers out to. And that's how we began our engagement. And quite to our astonishment, we had about 650 people providing responses to that first round of engagement. And I say that kind of surprisingly because if we did our traditional open houses in person here in the boardroom, we would have the boards set up. We would have expected about 50 to 100 people, which is kind of what we received during our zoning update process, which is a very big project. So we were thrilled with the turnout you see here. And so from our Survey Monkey, we were able to gauge feedback to see what were some of the more popular items that people were interested in seeing. And I won't read through them all, but you can see in declining order, interest in hiking trails, scenic vistas, picnic areas, flush restrooms, shoreline exploration, and so on. We also asked people, when you factor in a required park entry fee, what were the most desired facilities? And they somewhat mirror what's in the left-hand column, but hiking trails played a big role in that, 73%. Water access and stairs to the trail from the Bluff area, 63%. And then the following two were the overnight camping, camper cabins, and winter hiking and snowshoeing. Those rounded out the top 4. The 5th highest would have been parks, playgrounds, and picnic areas at 45%. So from that information, we took the feedback we received and we began our concept development. And with the help of our consultant, we created 3 different concept plans that people can consider. We had a plan that emphasized camping, a plan that emphasized adventure, and we had a plan that emphasized hiking. One of the things we wanted to make clear to people was that as part of the park program requirements, and because some of the money that was used to purchase the park property was DNR stewardship funds. There are certain elements that we have to have in the park, and those are shown in the right-hand column over here. They would be hiking, cross-country skiing, fishing, bow and rifle hunting, and trapping. So as you see in the plan document, if you read it, those are activities that are included and have to be included at least on the Eckert property, the middle 55 acres, and I'll provide more details on that in just a moment. So online, we created a whole story map that people were able to access and review and analyze the different concepts. I won't go into a whole lot of detail, but the plan on the left emphasized more of the camping. The plan in the middle emphasized more of the adventure recreational options. We had zip lining and items like that in there. And then concept 3 had the most hiking options. Again, we used the similar engagement method. We sent out notices to everybody that we initially did in the first phase. As part of the first phase, we asked people if they wanted to be put on a master email list. And we had a very impressive, almost 300 people, 285 people that wanted to be on the master email list. So we are in constant communication with at least those 285 people as we have updates to the website. So as we went through this process, we had 142 responses from the survey that was provided online and in our project webpage. And the preferred response was a mix of all the concepts. We had approximately 30.8% support a mix of the 3 concepts. Concept 3, which supported the hiking emphasis, was in second place. And then the adventure and the camper cabins and the camping was at 20. But by far and away, at almost 1/3 of the respondents, it was a mix of the concepts. And so from that, with the help of our consultants, we created what we're coming to you at this point and before you now with a master plan document. There were a number of factors that went into the creation of that document. We obviously considered public input, but we also had to consider some of the limitations that we have with the property. And one of the primary ones we had to deal with right away was the access configuration into the park. As most of you know now, we have Old Highway 35 that kind of comes in this alignment right here. It's got a very jolted access point on the north end and a very jolted access on the southern end that does not provide good sight distance if you're looking left or right. We have some serious grade issues at the northern access that had to be accounted for. And then when we had our preliminary meeting with our DOT representative, Mark Bowker, our regional representative, he was indicating to us for a project of this size and with the traffic anticipated, we would not be able to utilize the south and north accesses. So from that, we did some studies to determine the primary access point onto the property. What we ended up with was the main access point at the very northerly tip of the property. And then we would have an 18-foot drive that would lead to the entry station, approximately 800 to 1,000 feet off of Highway 35, so we could have stacking if necessary on some of the busy days. Once you reach the entry point, you would take a right and go to the proposed activity area in the middle of the park, or you would continue into the park where we are proposing some of the camping accommodations. The internal access drives would be 18 feet wide with 2-foot gravel shoulders on each side of the drive, and we did this after consulting with our Highway Commissioner, Robbie Croix, for some of the anticipated traffic volumes in the park. Again, the main access drive to the park facilities, and then an access drive into our camping facilities down here. As Mr. Butler referenced earlier, we have an existing River Heights trail that accesses the 4 in-holding properties in this location. So currently, to get to the in-holding properties such as Mr. Butler, he would come off of Old 35, take River Heights Trail in this location that's shown in the red X's, and then come along in here and access their property in this location. As part of our master planning, we are proposing that we remove and eliminate this part of River Heights Trail because we do not want two different accesses that would have to be monitored into the park. This would be the primary entrance for the inholdings, and they would simply follow River Heights Trail into this location here. The proposed alignment would require us negotiating with the inholding properties an easement agreement that would detail construction specifications, maintenance, and things of that nature. I will show you a slide a little bit later. Mr. Butler had concerns about unencumbered access. We can achieve that with this plan. We will have a wider entrance at the entry station that allows for 2- and 3-lane entry. From what we talked to from other park supervisors and park superintendents who have experience in dealing with inholding properties, you just allow them to free flow without any permits, assuming that they would be going right to their residences. The same with delivery trucks, garbage trucks, and things of that nature. We would not stop them. We would not look for stickers on their vehicles. They would come and go as they would please. We would have a separate lane for people that would have to stop at the entry station to get their access permits. But we would have at least 1, if not 2 additional lanes that would allow free flowing in and out of the property. Again, this just shows some of the preliminary engineering we did with the main access. So think of the left-hand side of your picture here would be north. You're looking at it from a different angle. But as part of this and meeting with DOT and our highway commissioner, and because of the volume anticipated within the park, we had to design something with bypass lanes and designated turn lanes into the property. You see the old Highway 35 in this location right here. We did have a preliminary discussion with the town of St. Joseph, and they believe it would be in the best interest to vacate this old access, create the new access into the park, and then the old 35 would be terminated with a cul-de-sac in this location, and then the old 35 would just be removed in this location, hence creating the new access into the park. Again, we had DOT and our highway commissioner review this, and the design you see up here is about a 20% engineering design document that does take into account DOT and highway commissioner comments. So if and when we need to move forward, we would feel pretty good about moving ahead with this plan and this alignment. Next, we'll just take a look at the draft activities within the park. On your screen, you see the entire park, but for purposes of presentation, I'll be dividing it into a north, central, and south parkland area. Some of the pictures you see on the right are just some of the camper cabin, yurt, lodging facilities. We are proposing some hiking facilities I will talk about in a minute. Picnic shelters, playgrounds, rope adventure courses. We do have a sledding hill that Mr. Butler referenced earlier that I will talk about in just a moment, along with some of the open grasslands and other features within the park. So we'll start off by taking a look at the North Blufflands area. This is the furthest northerly part of the park. This represents the Richards property acquisition, which is approximately 50 or so acres. And this would really be the least developed of the sectors of the park. You would come in the main access road at the bottom. We had the central parking lot that hike-in campers would use. They would access through a series of nature trails. And then we are proposing 13 hike-in sites around a circular route in this area. You can see by the white lines the steepness of the bluffs that we are definitely staying off of. We're not going to really impact these bluff areas at all. More importantly, we have 2 overlooks with beautiful vistas onto the St. Croix. We also do have trail access to the shoreline down at this location. We do have 1 picnic shelter that we would include for the hike-in campers. At this point, we would not be providing any bathroom facilities because according to DATCAP, our Department of Agricultural Trade and Consumer Protection, we need to get permits for this type of camp setting. And because it's designated a rustic site, we cannot have any restroom facilities. So they would have to make do with what's going to be provided on individual hike-in sites or else come down to the central park area. We will have bathroom facilities there. Also in the future, depending on when the property to the the east develops, we may have an opportunity to work with the developer, or if the county is able to purchase easements, we would have a secondary way to access this property for maintenance through any development proposals from the east. And this is where we could look at that time to do potential bathroom facilities, depending on the proximity of the access to that area. But initially it would be hike and camping. You see samples of the picnic shelter in this location here. Next we'll take a look at the central Bluffland area, which, as I covered earlier, includes the access point onto 35. We will have bike trails that will connect to our regional trail system off of 35. A bituminous trail going straight to the main activity area. Within the main activity area, you see a list on your left here in this box of what we plan on including in this area. The parking lot with expansion to accommodate bus drop-off areas for school field trips, things of that nature. This would be the area where the hike and campers would park as well. We would anticipate having flush restrooms, facilities in this area, along with 4 picnic shelters, picnic area, a space-themed playground, adventure area, and as mentioned earlier, the trailhead to get to the north. In terms of proximity of the playground and parking area, we took a look at the distances to these in-holding houses to make sure we had adequate buffer. And from the edge of the playground to the first house within the in-holdings is about 750 feet. So about 2.5 football fields with some of the buffering that we're proposing along the perimeter. And then just by virtue of the topography, there's also going to be some natural screening and things like that. So again, think of it in terms of football fields. We'll be about 2.5 football fields away from the closest structure. Other features within the central Blufflands area, we do have a smaller parking facility here for those people who want to do a mountain bike training course, more for the younger kids that we'll have in here. And then in wintertime, we are proposing a sledding hill in this area, assuming that we can readjust and realign River Heights Trail in this location. Again, the existing River Heights Trail at the bottom. This phase in this area also would include restoration of the oak savanna, which was the original feature at the turn of the century. Since then it's been cropped over, but we do want to restore that for natural habitat. We would have a nature hiking trail around the entire oak savanna that then would loop around to another outlook and then connect to the trail I just talked about in the North Blufflands. So that would be one connected trail. The North Blufflands trail length that I just showed you earlier is about 1.1 miles in length. The length of this trail in the central area is about 1.5. So if somebody came to the park, wanted to do a hike, just by doing those 2 different hiking features would be about 2.5 miles in hikes. And again, the access would be to the in-holding properties in this location, very similar to what it is now. And then they would have access onto their public street in front of their homes. River Heights Trail is currently on an easement on property that the county acquired through the Eckert acquisition. We did have discussions with our corporate counsel about the ability for the county to use that as park access. And the comments we received from corporate counsel was that it's feasible. We just have to make sure we maintain unencumbered access to the in-holding properties. And again, I believe we can do that. We will not have rail or gates in those locations that would hinder any access during the different seasons. This is anticipated to be a year-round park, so we don't anticipate gating the facility unless it's an emergency, but I don't think we would be doing that, just to make sure we have the access covered for the residences. And then thirdly, we get into the South Blufflands area, and this is where we kind of focus our camping features. You'll notice that the areas in brown here are kind of the upland areas. Everything else kind of to the southeast in this section is very ravine, steep slopes, along with everything on the back side of the Eckert cabin down to the river. So this section features the extension of the 18-foot driveway down to different pockets or series of camper cabins a couple in this location. As you go further down, we have a few clustered in this area. And then we also have some yurts that are proposed, kind of a camping feature that you see in the picture right in this location, kind of as an alternate to camper cabins. In all, we'd be proposing approximately 17 camper cabins and 7 yurts in the southern area. And again, these areas would have access via the driveway. We have some scattered off-site parking or off-driveway parking that people can use if they want to go for a hike or utilize for the cabin usage. Another feature of this phase would be the swing bridge trail. Because of the ravines and the natural topography, we are proposing a trail that would follow the contours of the bluffs, but where we would need to cross, we would have a swing bridge that's kind of shown in this bottom middle picture here, just to kind of enhance the hiking experience. Another feature to this of the 17 camper cabins, we are proposing that 2 of them are ADA accessible to make sure that we are providing accessibility to the park features to people with different abilities. The Eckert cabin in this location, the existing Eckert cabin, would be continued to be utilized. We do have some different proposals in the plan that would maybe rent it out as a camping feature, also as maybe artists, residents and artists who would maybe use the parcel and the property for getting views of the river. We just haven't determined that at this point, but we do provide a number of options in the plan that could be considered. Again, this slide just summarizes all the features. Maybe more importantly, if I can have you focus on the bottom right-hand box that talks about the recreation components. As you notice, we are not proposing anything active or organized, such as baseball fields, football, anything like that, anything that would need lighted facilities. We're really trying to stay away from the organized recreational activities and really stick with the more passive type of uses. We did that somewhat out of the feedback we received from the people that responded to our surveys that really focused on the hiking and the natural recreation and resources. And then in this column here in the left box, you'll see the total number of miles of trails, 1.5 miles of paved trails, 3.65 miles of natural surface trails, which is basically crusher fines, 4 swing bridges and 2 stairways for direct shoreline access. So if somebody wants to go to the park to get a nice hike, good workout in, they could be hiking, about 5 miles in total. The plan also addresses some of our natural resource and invasive species issues that we need to deal with. We want to make sure that we enhance the native plant and tree species, so we do have a plan that shows money being put into eliminating and trying to manage some of the invasive species, and I'll show you a map here in just a moment. We want to annually do a site assessment to determine if we need to focus in one area or the other. Vegetation monitoring and inspections. To start, we are recommending through our consultant that we put aside about $25,000 annually for the first 10 years to address some of the high growth invasive species areas. I have had the pleasure of walking some of the property, and we do have some serious areas of buckthorn and things that really need to be managed quickly. And to do this, we would be trying to utilize grants and volunteer groups. We do have a number of grant options that could help us with this. We also have volunteer groups who, with some basic training, could help us manage some of those things. And again, utilizing some county funds for that. This next map just shows some of the invasive species, with the red being the most prominent. And if I have you look at the top middle map, this shows the locations of common buckthorn. And everything that you see in red has been deemed by our biology consultant as being very high growth with buckthorn. So you can see the challenge that lies ahead of us, especially as we get into some of the top of the bluff areas. Even the entry into the park adjacent to our pinewood forests, there's a significant amount of buckthorn. And then if you look at the bottom map, that's the Japanese barberry. They're focused in different parts of the park. So, you know, when you combine these maps, we do have a challenge ahead of us, but I think with the resources and the availability of grants and volunteers and monies, we can certainly begin to manage that. The end of the plan talks about a recommended phasing plan for construction and cost estimates. And so when we, with the help of our consultant, put this phasing plan together, we did this with being able to create an attractive, inviting park with a variety of recreational amenities to start out, and also the potential to start generating revenue. So the phase one on this map is what we call short term, and that's indicated in green on the map. All the areas that you see in green would include the access drive, the entry station, the Oak Savanna Prairie restoration, the driveways that go down into the southern part of the park, and then all of the lodging facilities. So the 24 camper cabins and yurts would be included in this phase. And again, that would be focused in the central and southern part of the park. We have a very detailed cost estimate at the end of the plan document, but I just summarized that estimate at $10.4 million. We used 2020 numbers, and we adjusted them for inflation for 2021, so they should be fairly accurate in today's dollars. The next map shows the midterm improvements, which are shown with kind of this mustard yellow color on the map. And this would include our adventure nature playground area, our mountain bike training course. We have the sledding hill in this location. We also talk about doing one of the Bluff stairways in this location here that would provide access to the St. Croix River. This would be a little bit less in terms of cost at approximately $1.25 million. And then the third and final long-term phase would include everything in red, which is primarily everything on the Richards portion of the park. Everything that you see in red, which would include the nature hiking trail to the 13 hike-in sites, the picnic shelter, and then the 2 scenic nature overlooks. And those costs would come in at $1.12 million. And then finally, I'll just close by concluding with, as part of the plan process, we identified some potential development revenue sources. I don't think any of these would be a surprise to anybody, but I think it helps just to identify them. Using the KIP program, which identifies projects and then provides a method of financing. St. Croix County Bonding Authority for specific projects. Voter referendum, which has been used in some parts of the state, which brings the question to the public for voting up or down. What I've been seeing more lately and working in Colorado and Minnesota is the sponsorship of specific park improvements. That's wherein a private company or corporation or somebody would have an interest in constructing a portion of the park, well, whether it's the playground facility, perhaps a segment of hiking trail, and then in exchange for that, we would recognize them with some kind of signage or similar identity within the park area. You know, a small town I worked in, we even did that with the VFW and Legion. They provided us some fairly good amounts of money for playground development from pull tabs. And then in return, we were able to put a nice plaque that's shown it was dedicated from them. So there's a lot of different opportunities. If you Google it, you'll find some interesting examples of what's going on around the country. Wisconsin DNR has a number of different grants. The DNR stewardship program money could be used along with land and wildlife conservation funds to maybe help with some of the erosion, getting some of the ravines stabilized and things of that nature. And then other sources, we have a very talented staff at our Natural Resource Land Conservation Division in Baldwin, and they would likely have other resources that we could tap as well. Then the right-hand column just identifies potential operating revenue, and of course entrance fees would be the big one. Camping from our camper cabins, yurts, and our hike-in sites. The Eckert cabin rental, depending on how we choose to structure that. picnic shelter rental for special events. General events, perhaps somebody wants to get married there and wants to tie up a shelter for an afternoon, we could certainly look at that. Rope course field trips, I know some schools like to do competitions with other schools for different events, and that's a potential opportunity if they'd like to tie it up for an afternoon. And then also we have a series of areas on the property that are currently in harvest pine plantations. I think in looking at some of the parcels and the areas of the pine plantations, we estimated that we could perhaps get maybe $30,000 to $40,000 off of that. So anyway, these are potential sources, albeit certainly not the end of the list, but ideas nonetheless. So I'm going to stop there and take any questions, comments, concerns, things that you see may need addressing additionally, or wherever the committee would like to begin the discussion.
All right, Ellen, we'll start.
A couple things I wanted to point out. John had a lot of material to cover. Thank you, John. Excellent job. I just wanted to point out that one of the things we did have in the budget is that the portions of River Heights Trail that would remain would be improved for under the plans to be used for more two-way traffic and that kind of thing. It wouldn't stay the way it is. That lower portion from about that corner on, and that the whole document plans to stay away from, there's a buffer shown very clearly on the plans to buffer those in-holdings there and the in-holdings that would be further down. There's one in-holding over there. So there's a significant 25-foot mixed vegetation buffer plan for all of that. That's also included in budgeting costs. And the last thing I just thought you might like to know is we had a lot of discussion about access to the water, to the St. Croix River, and acknowledging that people would really want to have access to the river, but what would be the most reasonable, safe way to do it? And what we came as a conclusion is shoreline walking, and also having wading areas, literally putting buoys out that would indicate a depth that would keep it safe, like maybe up to waist height or something, and not any deeper than that. It would not be swimming, and we think that is the appropriate approach that would balance access with usage that wouldn't cause, this is a fast-moving river, a lot of boats, a lot of things going on out there, and we think that's a good balance. So I think that's important, that we really thought we came up with a good compromise. So.
And maybe for the committee to consider big picture, when you look at the general location of Eckert Bluffland, people who may want to come for a stay or camping for a weekend, you might say, well, you can see the park in one day, why the need for the camper cabins? But if you look at it from a regional perspective, and when we have our comprehensive trail network completed, I think people will be able to do a number of different things. You're going to be a hop, skipping away from Willow River State Park, where they do have a beach that would complement what we have. Willow River Park also has group camping, which we do not, so we were very careful not to duplicate services with Willow River. You also have downtown Hudson, North Hudson, downtown Stillwater. There's a lot for people to explore if they're coming out for a weekend or extended period of time. So you need to think futuristic visually, because this really is a step-by-step process. Again, we got the great first step in getting the grant to get the trail to the doorstep of Eckert. We're doing the master plan. At this point, as I mentioned earlier, phase 2 for the trail would go up 35 to County V, eastward to Willow River State Park. So that application will be due in January, so we'll be coming to you with a resolution of support very soon for that application. And then the final phase would be the big connection to the loop trail. So just keep that in mind as well.
I guess I got quite a few things. Let's start with number one on the access with the realignment for going on to Highway 35. Is there any additional property that would have to be acquired for that, or is it all fit within the current road right-of-ways?
So it does fit within the existing right-of-ways. As part of the amount of hard surface we'll be adding due to the turn lanes, the bypass lane, we are going to have to provide for some ponding. We are looking at the possibility of doing that within the old Highway 35 right-of-way. That would be vacated. Half of that right-of-way would be turned back to the county. Half of that right-of-way would be given to the landowner to the north. Right now, we are showing a ponding feature that would take some of, or utilize some of this property here, private property, but we had to make sure we left room for the bike connection, the 18-foot access, the wider turn lane in this location, or the width of the apron, I should say. But we were able to avoid most everything, again, except for a potential ponding area. And we are looking at options, so we would not have to utilize another's property.
So under the currently, then I'm not exactly sure if you have, would you have to acquire some land for the ponding, or do you think you'll be able to fit that onto property that's either part of this project or within the right-of-ways?
We believe we can fit it within the property. We just wanted to show the worst case scenario.
Sure.
The other thing about vacating right away, this old Highway 35 segment is 66 feet wide. So when property is vacated, each abutting property owner gets half, 33 and 33. If this had to be the location, we would certainly like to negotiate with the property owners to see if we could do a land exchange using some of our right-of-way.
Yeah.
We haven't had the discussions yet until we had more discussion over the plan.
Okay. Next question, I was kind of talking a little bit with, I think with Ellen, but it sounds, if I understood right, that the park entrance facility would also be set up with both flush toilets and shower point?
I think it could be. I don't think the plan got to that level of detail other than the entry station. We have a cost estimate of about $650,000 in today's dollars. And again, that'll be subject to design, and that can certainly be looked at.
I think if you're doing a plan like this and with the amount of camping facilities and everything that's there, me personally, I'd strongly suggest you'd move towards having that as a part of the project. I know long term, or in the short term, you're going to get a lot of people, but if you have extended stay people, if they're going to stay more than a night or two, they're going to be looking to get a shower someplace for most people.
And we can certainly add language to clarify that. We can add narrative to include that, if that's the thoughts of the committee. Yes.
I'm sorry I'm beating you up with so many questions at once, but the next item I just wanted to, as we're looking at this, one of the things I'd like maybe to consider. I've been working on a project in New Richmond that is in Freedom Park area, and we've worked with the military on military contracts. They have done right now in about 3/4 of a mile plus of walking trails, and set up their pad site for a new veterans center and senior center. And they're also being employed over the next 2 years for additional projects, which will include construction of the facility with about a labor savings of $1.5 million. That becomes, for these guys, this becomes kind of a win-win scenario because they end up working with local contractors and people that have oversight of their work, so they get additional training, and skill sets are improved dramatically by working with this type of thing. and it is a big benefit to the communities because they have the labor savings. The federal government, if they're done on an annual training basis, which is a 2-week jaunt, and they can be rotated with different units, they're generally, it's a 15-day cycle for each one of the units that come through, but they have multiple units then. There is a unit that we have used for doing, and they're by all things which would, that's why I'm thinking of it for this project, is it's a bridge building unit, reserve unit in Hammond. That's what they do. So this would be a kind of a project that may be up their alley. There is a process to get the military involved. It includes noticing the general public that we're looking at having a project like this go out, so that if there's complaints from contractors and people that say we don't want to see this, but we've generally had no negative support against any of these types of things in the past. So this is, that's one thing. Okay, I won't go any further than that on that. I'll let somebody else do some.
Scott, talk about the economic impact statement that you're thinking of.
Yes, yeah, there's, to be able to take this kind of project and sell it to the county board as a whole, it's wholesale, I really think that we would want to take a look at this and see what the financial ramifications are. So a business plan basically of, if we did this and we did, and this was built out, we know if it's a $10–15 million project, we're not going to cash flow, but can we support it so that once the project is done, that it nets out so that we don't have any ramifications against the general levy. So we aren't trying to go after additional funds. We want to make this, if we're going to do this, we need to do it so that it nets out, so that if we're hiring somebody to take care of this park or anything else, that we have enough income coming in to support it. I believe that, just looking at it, I think it should. But that's something we would want in black and white. The other thing with this that I think we should consider is this is a very unique park. When I looked at this, I was just in awe. I thought, my gosh, what an awesome idea. There's so many things here that nobody else has. And to have something like this in our area is a tremendous asset if it gets built out. But the deal with this is that there's other impacts that come into it, and I think that would be another thing we need to review on this and have as a tool as we're talking about this, as what is the economic impact of this, how the people that this brings in will generate additional use of other businesses and everything in the area, and we really should look at that as part of how this asset will impact the county.
Okay, so that's a heck of an interesting idea that I think we should flesh out. And, let's keep going. Anybody else have things? Judy.
Yeah, just two at this point. One is, and it may be on there and maybe I missed it, but you're trying to connect it to a bike trail. Let's say you have bikers that are camping along. How safe is it going to be for them to bike from the entry down to either a shelter or a yurt? Because it doesn't, I mean, are there safe, I mean, it's just an idea. I mean, if we're talking about bikes being part of this, I think there should be some safe bike trails in the park, and maybe there already are and I missed it, or there aren't, and that might be another possibility.
So to answer Judy's question, everything, and I should have clarified this, everything you see in white, the white lines, the trail segments are bituminous blacktop and are intended for pedestrians or bikes. So coming off of Highway 35, we have a main bike trail that goes to the central activity area. And then we also have them going around the Oak Savannah Trail Loop. They could also utilize the 18-foot wide access drive as well with bicycles. Those would not be off limits to bicycles. The trail segments you see in the brown would be the nature, the crusher fines. We would not promote biking on those trails. Okay. Those would be for pedestrians and access to hiking sites.
And that leads me to my second question, which I brought up when we were presented this for the first place. We may have designated it rustic, but if we're talking about a lot of people coming there, we need some kind of sanitation procedure, rather than someone walking 10 feet into the woods, digging a hole, hopefully, and then covering it again. I mean, to be honest, if we're expecting this to be as popular as it is, we have to be realistic about expectations and what people will do.
And you're referencing the hike-in sites, correct?
Yep, the northern part.
So there are park agencies that take the preemptive, and they, before each season, they will pre-dig a designated spot and have a very simple wood structure that is designated for use.
Oh, okay, that was not mentioned. Okay, so
That's
there
like
will be...
the boundary waters, kind of?
I'm not sure what they do in the boundary waters, but some
like
of
the old-fashioned outhouses.
Well, I don't know if we do the outhouse. I think it would be something more simple.
It's a simpler approach than an outhouse. There's no structure. We're not hauling things up into this harder to reach area. Well, we would be designating to make sure that there wouldn't be people just saying, well, just go there. And if it's a dug pit, and then we're treating it and perhaps even providing lime to treat it, to keep the smell down and that kind of thing. It's a little bit like an old outhouse, but without the house.
It's just like
Well, if it's as popular as you think, I think I'd want a house for a little privacy. I mean, to me, it's important. I mean, you've got a hiking, you've got people able to camp there, and there's a picnic area. I mean, it's common sense that they're going to need to use the bathroom, and let's provide adequate facilities, not deluxe, because this is primitive. But I mean, I just feel there should be.
I think there are people out there, generally speaking, younger people who are in very good physical fitness, who would like to hike in a long ways and rustic camp. And those people would be able to come down. Like one of the things we said that it was mentioned by Scott that you could have the we could have the showers at the entrance station. We are planning, and John mentioned that if you would, where the trailhead would be, or where the hike-in spot. Like you drive there, you park, and it's right below that, right next to the playground. There'd be a special parking lot just for the people who want to hike in, or a special portion of the parking lot. There would be a flush restroom building there, and there could be showers there. Now, you're not going to hike down there every time you want to go to the bathroom, but you would be able to go use those facilities perhaps a couple times a day or whatever they felt like. Again, I'm not a person who's done that, but I do have people I know who are friends who do love that concept. Also, we could, obviously it's a little bit harder. One of the things John mentioned that would be a very small picnic shelter, and at some point, I don't know how long it'll be, there's property very close by that's being developed into houses just to the east a little ways. Who knows how long before that farm sells, and at that point when we might have an access, then we could perhaps put in flush restrooms. Sometimes there's just not access to get up there right now to put flush restrooms.
No, I wouldn't want flush restrooms, but just
or something.
Something, just a.
And also,
yeah, I'm just being realistic.
Yeah, and also keep in mind when you look at the map here, we have a lot of words and graphs on here, but just this section of the park we're looking at is approximately 55 acres. The distance between some of these campsites range anywhere from 150 to 200 feet. So it's not like they're going to be next to each other. We are going to be positioning the campsites, so there are some natural buffers.
Okay.
There are also some grade change elevations here that will also accommodate some privacy as well, if that's a concern.
Those were just my two concerns.
So you go to the Boundary Waters, you want to pick the campsite that has the longest trail to that potty and maybe a little bend in it. Because it's, you know, and hopefully that's what we'll have here, a little bit of a bend in the trail before you get up to the stool. Anyway.
Oh, I'm just going to say one more thing. Fantastic job. I mean, very impressive. I showed it, I mean, I had had it for a while. I hadn't shown it to my husband. I showed it to him today, and it was like, wow, this is going to stand out in the state of Wisconsin, was his comment, that there's things in there that are unique and worthwhile. So, I mean, that was nice to know, because yeah, that was great.
Just a couple quick things for me is I really like the idea of having individuals or companies sponsor certain parts of the build to help minimize the cost on the county. I've seen all varieties of things with plaques on them from people sponsoring builds, and I think it would have no problem finding groups to do that. A second thing is, who would be responsible for monitoring the safety and maintenance of the high ropes course, because the high ropes course especially involves making sure people are harnessed properly, etc. So who would be responsible for that?
I think we'll have Dennis answer that because he actually has experience with it. So,
excuse me. What we're planning to start with is a low ropes course that wouldn't have the harnesses and everything. Eventually moving to a high ropes course, which we would probably contract with someone that does that kind of thing to operate it and do all the training.
So it would obviously only be open during certain times of the day then. I mean, you wouldn't want it open at night anyway, but it would have to be when the people are there to operate it.
And the low ropes course, just to clarify, looks kind of like just a rope version of playground equipment, right? Sean, you have anything else? Ed?
A couple things. So there seems to be some concern about the road that runs in there. I'm guessing it's going to be improved, and then the county will take over maintenance of that, I would think. Okay, so he said that they've stuck money into it, but they would no longer have to stick any money into it, correct? Correct. Okay.
right, and we can clarify too, if you can go, John, to one of the little easier to see pages. The road in front of the four houses, that portion of it, that portion has a little bit different designation and is actually part of their plat or their CSM that created 3 lots many, many years ago. We would not touch that road. That road is theirs. They would continue to have to maintain that. A couple other additional things when he says a gate, we're not quite sure what he's referring to, but we do know that we would have a little bit of a fence if you can point to where the fence was, John, along the beaches. And at that, we would build a fence and have very clear signage, private property, no admittance, on the upper and the lower portions. We also, yeah, that's a great site there. And then, as I said, they would have to maintain that part themselves, and we actually would get off the agreement to maintain the part in front of their houses. Right now, they just split everything equally, and we've been paying it the last few years. And we paid about $500 a year is all it's been. So, but we would take over the maintenance of the whole River Height, other portion, and we've actually even talked about, so they wouldn't have to change their addresses. We can do whatever they would prefer, but that could become a different name, or the trail in could become a different name, so that their River Heights Trail would be more in front of their houses, if that's what they'd prefer.
So it's really just their driveway in front of the house. It's not really a road.
Well, it's built like a road, and it is, and it actually, it's on their plats, so, but it's, we could explain it more in a, maybe off.
That's fine.
That is a private road and it's not belong to the town of St. Joseph, or?
Okay, none of it is truly a public road, but that portion in front of their houses was dedicated to the public, to the town of St. Joseph, who has accepted it, but has never, we checked with the state, they've never done any maintenance on it, ever. Never done a thing, because the other part is truly completely private.
Another thing, so hunting is going to be allowed on this property? Obviously, there's some safety concerns, but I know other places, I know north of me in the Polk County, there was an area where they, you could do hunting, but in order to hunt there, you had to do brushwork, like remove buckthorn and such things. So they, and I know it was very, very successful. I don't know if it still is, but so if you wanted to hunt, you needed to put in some hours to get the privilege to hunt there.
Yeah. Well, we've got a kind of a plan to approach it. John can elaborate. There were a lot of comments about the hunting situation. A lot. And I don't know what...
Yeah, with some of the stakeholder meetings we had with some of the residents, I think two of the biggest concerns were the hunting ability, and then as Ellen mentioned earlier, some of the signage that we are showing on the master plan. That was a result of some of the concerns from the in-holding residents, along with some of the Starwood residents, about people straying off of parkland onto private property. They wanted to make sure that we had areas adequately signed, and in some cases fenced, to prohibit that or certainly discourage it. And so the plan does reflect that. In terms of the hunting, you'll see on this map and in the map in your packet, we show these brown circles around different structures. And those brown circles represent a 300-foot radius from the structures, whether they're existing, or we're showing some of the circles in the proposed areas where the camper cabins will be. Those would be off limits to hunting per DNR rule. So as the park develops, there'll be less and less area to hunt. But until then, we do allow hunting. The Richards property that was purchased, this northerly 50 acres, we did not use DNR stewardship grant funds, so we would not have to allow hunting in this area. However, for the remainder of the property, we would, because we did use some DNR stewardship dollars along with the bridge mitigation funding to purchase some of those areas. So that is in play.
No, I got one more now, because you just, assuming that there's hunting and trapping, who makes the decision as to who gets dibs on hunting and trapping there? Or is it going to be open? If you can't have 20 hunters all going there.
Okay, so we haven't done it yet. There are 2 or 3 steps we're allowed to do under state law, and they all have to be approved by the county board, by this committee proposing them, and then go to the county board in our ordinance, and then go to the State Natural Resources Board for approval. There really wasn't any reason to bring those forward yet because it's open land. But, and without getting into a lot of detail, a couple of the things we could do is we could have a lottery system, and this county board could say, we think that this will support 5 hunters. Or and they could be to this area, 5 in this area, 5 in this area, 5 in this area. And we could have a lottery, and then they would just apply, and we do some kind of random way of picking people. We could also just have seasons. As long as we don't exclude all hunting, all trapping, all everything, we could back off to certain seasons, like winter hunting, spring turkey hunting and no hunting during the summer and fall, or early fall. Or we could have a bow season. We could have it, and I shouldn't say we, you guys could make those and adopt it, and then we'd have to talk it, the Natural Resources Board, into doing it. And actually, the way we wrote our ordinance is based on exactly the way hunting is done at Willow River State Park, and that is what staff at this point, barring hearing a lot of problems, would like to propose for the areas that are not within the orange, pinkish circles. But that, so we could go back and look at that, but that would have to be brought up and go through you guys, and then we'd make a presentation at the state, and hopefully it would pass. And that does happen. I've noticed just this month, the Natural Resources Board is considering a limitation on land that was purchased with stewardship funds, and voting on it. So it's on their, I watch their agendas, so. And that's the second one, at least the second one this year, so. But I think those would, things would come about once we started making improvements.
I love the logo. Who came up with the logo?
With the little hill?
Yeah,
Excuse me. The consultants helped us with that.
it's really nice. It looks nice branding, so they say. I want to pick up where Supervisor Counter kind of injected. The idea of coming up with the value of the park. He was kind of talking about the cost of the park too, but I kind of shy away from the idea that a government runs like a business, and I don't think that this is anything like an enterprise fund, and I apologize, I don't like to disagree with you in public, but it is a valid idea, I believe, to have an expression of economic impact that the park will have on the community. What's the multiplying factor? What is the benefit to the community? And I don't know how we go about projecting that. I don't know if we turn to another resource, maybe regional planning. I know that they have some tools for that kind of thing, or if we have in-house tools for that kind of thing. But to look at the economic impact that Willow River has on the community, look at the numbers we have that you've already expressed for the residents of St. Croix County who live near the park, and also project how many people will come in from out of state and out of town. And you understand where I'm going with that? Okay, I won't belabor that point any longer. Also, save the skink, by God. We've got one endangered species. Can we get a grant because we have an endangered species?
We would have to look into that. I don't know.
Yeah,
Okay.
I don't know either.
Can we get buttons?
Usually we
Save
just
the
have to save the skink,
Did you guys
whether we
read that?
don't get money to do it.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, I don't think they
We're
paid
responsible to protect
Yeah.
the field skink. It's a little salamander. We have an endangered species. Okay, that's all I have. That's all I have. This is just a fantastic, what's the next step, John?
Well, now that we've talked through questions or concerns, I think maybe the first question we need to answer is, do you want the economic data to go with the body of the plan to public hearing? Because if you want that, I wouldn't even bother trying to set a public hearing date. We would need to figure out how to compile that information, add it to the document, and then come back to you with that information. So I think it really depends on how you want to structure that information.
I think it's nice to have, when we're talking to our colleagues, this is
Sure.
This is how this park is going to impact. Every time we have a conversation between us, it's almost an automatic question, well, what's the benefit to the community? Or what's it going to cost? And the answer is, this is the benefit to the community. So I'd like to go in ready for that conversation, because it's a valid conversation. It's perfectly valid, and it's critical to the taxpayer. What's in it for me? So I don't know how long it takes to put that together, but that type of social accounting, I think, needs to be part of this conversation, this larger conversation, and I think it would be good to bring that into the public meeting.
We can review some options.
And I think we need to, I'd like to poll my colleagues here. What do you guys think?
yours goes in relation to some stuff I have to say about about the budget, like how we're going to pay for this. And that goes along with some of what you were saying, so I don't know if I should.
Don't spill the beans on that quite yet, Judy.
Okay, then we'll
But
just.
what do you think of the idea of having,
Oh, I think it's a definite, the sooner the better, for everything, for the stakeholders, for the board members. You know, if there's any positive benefit is a plus.
does anybody object to holding off a little while for public hearings so we can?
I think it's very important that we don't rush into this, that we do make sure we know how to, that we need to sell it, for sure. And I think we're all sold here that this is going to be a unique park. But I don't think we don't want to rush it through. We want to make sure that we get it out to the public and the other board members that, you know, this is going to be a benefit to the St. Croix County and the area, and do it right.
Okay.
So at this point, then, we will not have you focus on any public hearing date until we come back and have further discussion, is kind of what I'm hearing.
Okay.
There we go. It had to sync. You know, just a quick search, because I've seen economic impacts before. The National Recreation and Park Association has a document here. It's like 20 or 30 pages long, measuring the economic impact of park and recreation services. So there's material out there. I'm sure the staff will be able to find this also and make some calculations for you. I think it's a very good idea.
Maybe it won't take a whole long time to put that together.
I don't know about that, but I know that there is some supporting material that will help.
So there's also material that was created by the state of Wisconsin DNR regarding the impact of the state parks, which we have one in our backyard. And so I have actually brought that up at county board meetings before, and we can re-tap into that and look at that. I think the other part that was requested, I don't think the economic impact will be very hard to find great information that we can extrapolate from. I think it'll take a little bit longer. We'll need a little time, but not a huge amount, to do a business plan, produce estimated revenues and estimated expenses, which is what I assume you wanted. Not payments towards the development of the park. Okay. And an operating budget, if you will. Okay. So I think that would take just a little bit longer, but both of those are doable. If we had been talking about, I just want to point this out to them for the committee members for their knowledge. John, you were going to say it, but if we had been talking public hearing date, we would not have been talking November, because this will require a 1-month public hearing notice. So it would have been December. So just keep in mind, we can certainly try to bring this back for this information perhaps back in November. Maybe we'll have part of it, maybe we'll have all of it in November or December. But whenever you do decide to set it, it'll be like 2 months ahead. Okay? So if you're thinking timing and that kind of thing. And then, of course, a month after that, it would hopefully go to county board for adoption. So that's, excuse me, that's sort of the timing we would be discussing. And like I said, I think the operating budget is just a little, it'll take a little while, and so I think the economic impact will take a little while. So definitely, maybe we can have something by next month.
Excellent. Thank you. It'll be worth the wait. It'll be a better conversation with our colleagues and probably with the public, so thank you. The next business item is funding options for the development of Eckert Blufflands Park. And if nobody else minds, I'd like to turn it over to Judy, because she has a great idea.
I mean, the initial thing that comes out in my mind is if we're going to be bonding for an addition to this building, add on 10 or 15 million for parks. Parks have been neglected for years. We're at the bottom of everything. We don't get much. We didn't get a single cent out of over $7 million from the ARPA. And this would be one way of doing it, which, and I don't mean to sound blasé or anything, but man, if you're borrowing $80 to $100 million, what's $10 million more? I mean, and I'm not belittling it, but it doesn't up the taxes hugely. And one of the things that also bothers me now is if this takes a while and we don't get it done before the building bond, if the building bond goes through, people are going to say, man, we just bonded out for $80 to $100 million. I don't want to spend any more money. So it's like there's two things going on, and I don't know how they're going to interrelate with each other. And so I don't know where that leaves us with funding, because I would love, I mean, everything else we've done with parks has been piecemeal. Whenever we can get the funds, we do it. And this is such a unique opportunity. And in my mind, it would be better if we could at least do the vast majority of it all at once to get the benefits of it sooner. So, you know, I'm just throwing a lot of stuff out there, and I don't know where it's going to go, but now I have real concerns of if this does take a while, people aren't, you know, and if we decide, well, it's high enough so we should bond, are people willing to do it if we do the building bond? And another thing I'm going to throw out for Ken is we have all this money in our, the fund balance. And we're way over the 35%, if I remember. I mean, I don't know if the board wants to take a huge chunk out of that for parks and not attribute it towards, I don't know. I mean, there's just a lot of things that could happen, and I don't know what the best one is.
Yeah, I don't know how I feel about including this bonding item on with the building, because it might seem like we're just trying to sneak it in. At least that's how some people might view it, and I wouldn't exactly blame them. I really want to try to focus on setting standards for having businesses sponsor certain things, like when business wants to pay for materials for a shelter, they can put a plaque saying that the shelter was donated by whoever or whatever entity. I really want to push for that. I'm not completely against using some fund balance to help pay for it, to minimize the increase in taxes on the taxpayer. I think that $10 million would be a big ask to take out of the fund balance, but for sure some may be able to be used. But I would prefer to try to get private donations and have people and businesses sponsor parts of the build as much as possible.
I'm going to actually jump in. I've been, and I think you all know, I've been really opposed to the government expansion, and for strictly conservative reasons. However, I'm passionate about this park, and for also pretty, I think, conservative reasons. I think this park is good for the community because of what it'll bring to the community. I think this is very good for the highest populated area of St. Croix County, and what's good for the highest populated area of the county is good for the county, because it's going to bring revenue, it's going to bring tourism, and this is going to be very, very good for, I think, economic development, because it's a jewel. It's going to be someplace where we can bring people who are thinking of locating perhaps a business in St. Croix County and say, look what we have. This is who we are. And that's why, if there was a bond package that included this park, I would be willing to change my vote for the whole enchilada. And I'm not playing let's make a deal. I'm just saying it would be much more palatable to me to vote for a bonding package, and would make it very transparent it'd be on the county website, and we can give businesses an opportunity to make a contribution, and later on in the process, we can scale it back. But I know my experience of trying to raise money for a library in New Richmond, a city that has some businesses of, some means, it's almost impossible to get businesses to give money. It's pretty difficult. And I know there's more money in Hudson, but it's a tough sell. It takes a long, long, long time. And this park has too much to offer to just have a hope. We need to have a plan that's actionable and measurable, and we can put it on a calendar and say, this is the day it'll be finished. That's why I'm asking to bond it. And I'm asking to make a plan to bond, I think, $16 million. It's really how much would that work out on our debt load? Really, it wouldn't be very much money at all per household over the course of time. And we would get our courtroom, we would get our government expansion. It would be set for the next 30, 35 years. And we would get a park that would be an absolute jewel. I'm preaching, aren't I? I'm sorry. Anybody else want to speak?
I guess this question more goes, maybe Ken would be able to help us out in the future on, but if we were thinking of entertaining that kind of concept, I guess what I'd want to see is how would that impact be? Because we just did a whole bunch of graphs and charts on that for looking at what our peak was at a certain point when we had the New Richmond facility, and then the Baldwin Highway Department and the nursing home, when we hit all those loans were on and we hit a peak. If we were to do this kind of project, are we going to surpass that peak, or will we stay below it? Or that would be one of the questions I would want to know, because I mean, the concern would be, is this going to jump us where it's not achievable?
Yeah, all those charts and graphs are embedded in my memory. The calculation's actually fairly easy because it's some nice round numbers for me, but $16 million over 20 years at the current interest rate environment that we have, because we've done charts on the other debt, comes out to 8 cents per $1,000 of equalized value. So 8 cents on a $100,000 house is $8. The average house, say, is $300,000. That's $24 a year of what the cost is for a $16 million park improvement plan. So that's the decision that the county board would have to make. That's the fiscal impact right there. And it's well within our borrowing capacity. Does it make the payments higher than what they had been before? Yes, it does, because it's more money. It's 16 million more. So those things all are higher, but that's the total cost.
If we were going to add on to if the government center goes through, if they decide to bond for it at whatever rate, at whatever amount, is it feasible that we could add the money for the parks in time and get the information out to people so that it's open and obvious? Because we're, well, it's not going to, that's my concern is the time. The government center has been worked on for a while. This has been worked on for a while too, but not at the bond level. And now tonight we're discussing the bond level, which in my mind makes absolute total sense. It's the only way we're going to get it done all at once. Because I'd agree with you that, with Dan, that we're not going to get the money from the businesses. We can put up one yurt a year. That's not going to do it. We want to get it done so that people can take advantage of it. And the only way I see it getting done is bonding, and I would like to connect the two of them, because like I said, if we're doing them separately, I don't see ours having a chance in heck if we do the government center first, because, but together, as long as something can be drawn up so that the monies that we have determined are going to go for the parks stay for the parks and don't get allocated any other way. I don't know how a bond can be stated like that. I mean, I don't know.
Yeah, so when you do a bond issue, so there's a whole bunch of questions there, but so I'll go backwards on them. So when you do a bond issue, in the authorizing resolution, you have to specify exactly what the money is going to be used for. And so what we've done in the past is we've said it's going to be used for this main project, and we do a tack on then. And so what we've used in the past is other KIP projects, but we could make it more specific to say, or park projects. So the bond issue would be primarily for the government center expansion project and any park projects, any authorized parks projects. So that's how you can limit it to just those. Then it can't be used to purchase a truck for highway or anything else. It's limited to what you've put in that resolution.
But can you do a specific amounts, or is it just the total amount that will get used by the two entities, whichever way they want?
Correct. It's the total amount.
And
but
who
you actually
determines?
want that flexibility, because if you do a project for the government center expansion and we come in $5 million under budget, I can't just expand the government center by an extra $5 million because I have the extra $5 million. But spending it on a park project is a lot easier because there's more variability in parks. So if I end up with really good bids on this project, I have more money to spend on projects on this other side of what the authorizing resolution is. So that's actually a tactic that we do use in the authorizing resolutions, to have a primary and a secondary use. Now, let me see if I remember the other questions that you had. Yeah.
Timing.
Yeah, timing, that's a good one. Timing-wise, I think what we're looking at is we're in the educational phase of the government center project right now. There'll be a presentation made to the full county board at the December county board meeting about the project. There's no vote at that point, but potentially the authorizing resolution could come as early as January to the admin and February to the county board. So timing-wise, that's kind of the window that we're looking at here. Now, the authorizing resolution, though, is the very first step in a project. All that does is say, yes, I'm going to be able to get the funding to do the project. Then I hire architects and we start design. So the initial work at that point is still very preliminary. There are additional votes that happen after that initial authorizing resolution. But it's the key one, and so that's the one that also sets the dollar amount, though. So it would have to be within that time frame. But I don't know that you have to have the park plan fully adopted by the time you do that. The two aren't necessarily directly tied together.
No, but it would be nice to have at least some economic information to give to the public and to the board about the benefits of doing this for the parks. Because that would help, I hate to use the word sell it, but that literally that's what it is. Yeah, there's got to be a better word.
Justify.
Yeah, that's it.
So,
I mean,
yeah, absolutely. If at all possible, timing-wise, trying to think about that, what I would like to see then would be economic impact reviewed at next month's community development meeting. Give community development 1 month to see what they can put together, but report back whatever it is they can at that point in time. And then take a vote by community development of how you want to fund the park, so that that can be put into the queue. Because I do what the elected body tells me to do. So just because one supervisor wants it or two supervisors, you're not there yet. You get 3 of them on this committee, though. All right, now I have a recommendation. Now it'll move forward in the process. So that would be something that I would need, though, is a recommendation from this committee to be including it in a bond issue.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, I would move to recommend it, that it would be added to this bond issue. That doesn't mean it's going to, but that means we can continue the work on the level that hopefully it will.
My only thought is I would wait until next month to get some preliminary numbers on the economic impact. Give the members some time to absorb and digest the idea. I know it's your idea, so you've put a lot of thought into it. I just don't know if the other members have had as much time to think about it.
Okay, that's fine, but one thing I do also have to say, Ken, is that I mentioned this to Dan a month ago about wanting to talk about this, and he said, well, I feel kind of uncomfortable and you should talk to Ellen first. So I waited a couple weeks and talked about it with Ellen, and she just looked at me and started laughing, and she said, I brought the same idea forward to Ken like a week or two ago. So it came separately, and I know I've talked to some other people also that it's come separately, so it's not as unique as some of the people may think it is. I'm fine withdrawing my motion.
Well, considering there wasn't a second, that's not going to be a problem. All right. I'm sorry to tease you, Judy. You know I love you. I think we've talked about that as much as we can. Any other thoughts? No? Okay, we're moving on. Let's talk about business item number 4, support interest in exploring a Friends of St. Croix County Parks group. And I think we're turning this over to Ellen.
So for those of you who don't know, there is a Friends of Perch Lake. It was organized back at the time they were trying, actually right about the time where the county was considering purchasing the property to build Perch Lake, or the park on Perch Lake, Homestead Parklands. And we've actually heard from a variety of people there, and I will mention verbally here that there's also, for instance, a Friends of Willow River and Kinnickinnick State Parks. Those friends groups can help focus some of the things that have been said today, like having volunteer efforts. Perhaps they have connections and they can talk to people they know. Perhaps there might be some business connections to try to assist with that kind of thing. They generally, those kind of friends groups are also willing to come and talk to county board at a county board meeting. We had the former, she's passed away now, but former owner and president of the Friends of Perch Lake for many years, would come every time there was any discussion about improvements and facilities and things at Homestead. She would come and she would always be at the county board meetings and speaking about it and talking about it, and she was the voice for them. And it can make a big difference. And that particular group doesn't have a lot of money, but has worked at fundraising for decades, and they have a mission statement, and they're a 501c3 organization. So we have other groups around the county too. The Sportsman's Alliance, while not a Friends of a particular park, certainly operate as an organization that gets a little bit of money every year. They used to do a lot more fundraising. They don't do as much now, but they advocate for small projects, and they advocate for things that improve things for hunting and fishing, and even hiking and canoe launches, and all kinds of great projects all around this county, and have helped to make really wonderful facilities for the recreation and hunting and fishing enthusiasts. So we've been talking about it. We've had it suggested to us by a couple different people, not a lot, and we think it's a really good idea. We think it would help to bring some more public interest and discussion. And as to why is it in front of this committee, it doesn't need your blessing, but it would help. If you had, it's not something that generally is done by employees. On the other hand, we have a variety of mailing lists. John mentioned earlier we have a large group who are asked to keep following this particular park. Not all of them would want to be a friend of the parks, but a few might. We have a large group of people who are on a mailing list from our bike ped plan. We have large groups who are simply people who were interested on our mailing list, things like the prairie enthusiasts and stuff like that. So one of the things we could do is let them know that there are people who might be, that it might be a great idea. It would cost just a little bit. We have mostly all these contacts on email. We could perhaps get it started, and mostly what we would be doing is looking for a few individuals, maybe 2 or 3, maybe 4, who might be willing to then move forward with this kind of project. So it would take a little bit of staff time. We don't have to do it in the next month or even the winter months or something. But I wouldn't want to start something like that with staff time without some support from the committee. So otherwise, I'll just keep, verbally chatting with people and bringing it up as a random idea and hope someone runs with it besides me.
So what you're really looking for is a champion.
It needs a champion. At the time that the Friends of Perch Lake was created, there was a group of about 12 individuals who were just super passionate about making sure that property was bought and homestead parklands became a reality. I know in talking to the director at Willow and Kinnickinnick State Parks that, and maybe some of you remember this, but there was an Owls group. They called themselves the Owls of Willow River, and they would do a lot of nature things, and they evolved into a bigger group called Friends of Willow River and Kinnickinnick State Park. And before that, it was just, again, a group of people who just really loved nature and outdoors and wanted to help Willow River State Park improve. So it does need champions. That kind of a thing does, to keep it going and to get it developed, and then they become champions of parks. And I think it should be Friends of all St. Croix County parks, because I think our Glen Hills Park and our Homestead Park and our other parks all need to have champions. So.
Thoughts, questions? Just keep your eyes open for somebody who's extraordinary.
Well, and at least for me, I think it's a great idea. I mean, if you're looking at community development, to say yes.
We could spend, I guess I'm looking for your support to do a little bit of outreach to try to find some individuals who might run with it and not be county staff trying to do it. That's what I'm looking for. Otherwise, we won't put that time into it. We haven't put any time into it yet, so.
I have a friend who's not running for county board in the next term who's had a lot of experience on community development committee.
But I'm not technologically savvy, so that leaves me out.
That's
You need all types.
all right. The date of our next meeting. Oh, wait, we've got to go through announcements and correspondence. Announcements and correspondence?
I wanted to just input to the same thing, that I would be definitely in support trying to find somebody to go that route. I don't know if there's anybody in some of our current organizations that could get involved. We have Star Prairie Fishing Game, and there's several other organizations that are out there that Sportsman's Alliance, that might be able to help out if they were asked. But the overall concept is excellent, because we need to think of ways of how to pay to take care of some of the things that go outside trying to pull it off from the budget.
That also holds true when you're developing like a mountain bike thing. There's groups out there that I know they're more than willing to work on them. So.
Now that we've went back to business item number 4, I guess the thought occurs to me that the idea of being a founding member of a friends group might really be appealing to somebody. Think about how cool it would have been to be a founding member of the Sportsman's Alliance 80 years ago. There's not a boat landing in St. Croix County those guys didn't help build. Okay, now, any other thoughts on business item number 4? Okay. Announcements and correspondence.
So I only have one. We have an event coming up at Willow Homestead Park. So we just want to promote it a little bit. It's Halloween at Homestead, trick or treat on the Bookworm Trail. There'll be hayride and costume contest and a little scavenger hunt for children and some trick-or-treating candies along the trail. And so you can see that. And we are actually looking for volunteers to help out. We have had a lot of interest on Facebook. I don't think we're going to have as many, but if I even cut it in half, we could have over 100 people attending the event. So we have some of our staff signed up, but we're looking for a few more people. If you'd like to sign up, contact us, Julie, Dennis, and you can sign up for any amount of time you want, 1 hour, 2 hours, 4 hours. That'd be great. Wear a costume or just leave it at home. We don't care. The other thing I would just mention is tell your friends, bring your grandkids, whomever you know, relatives, and it's a free event, no park pass required. Kind of end of our season at Homestead a little bit, so take a couple copies, pass them out to some friends, and hopefully if you know anybody who says, hey, I think I might like to volunteer, feel free to do that. So, thank you.
Requests for future agenda items?
I was just wondering, I know we had talked several months back about maybe changing our ordinance on changing the 25% slopes for recreation. I was just curious whether we're working on it or whether there's any work being done on it, so.
I can put on the next agenda, but we do have a draft. However, the application has not really gone forward, so we're thinking we have time to work on that more over the winter. That answers, and I can put it on next month's agenda if you want.
So we're not skiing at Snowcrest this year? No. All right. Then the date of the next meeting is Thursday, November 18, 2021, and I call this meeting adjourned. Thank you for coming.